Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. It's Colin, and today we're going to be reviewing the brand new album by COHEED and CAMBRIA, the father of make believe, VAXIS 3. All right, so this is the brand new album from prog, emo, post-hardcore legends, COHEED and CAMBRIA. This is the third in their VAXIS series, which has been the most recent continuation of the COHEED and CAMBRIA story. Now, if you're not super familiar with COHEED and CAMBRIA, they're one of those bands where like pretty much all of their albums tell one cohesive story. It's like one continual concept, just kind of told over multiple albums. They've actually taken it a step further, and they have like comic books and graphic novels that go along to the story. So if you want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the actual storyline of this music, go check that out. There's also plenty of videos and blogs and posts about the storyline itself. And the lyrics specifically on this series, the VAXIS series, very much tie into the storyline. So I normally don't even really get into lyrics anyway, but I'm definitely not going to get much into them in this review, just because like that could be an entire video of itself. Now, that being said, they have done a few albums here and there that were like not part of the storyline. I think there's like one in particular, maybe two, or like one on an EP. But I've really enjoyed this most recent iteration of the story, so the VAXIS story, and all three of the albums have been really killer. This one is certainly no exception. But before we actually talk about the music itself, let's talk about the physical release. Real quick though, before we do that, if you guys could please like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications, all that stuff really helps me out. If you enjoy my content, it's going to help you stay up to date with it. So, as far as the physical release goes, so I've already opened this, I've already listened to it, and they usually do really, really good with their physical releases. This one is certainly no exception. I really enjoyed the art concept for this album, like all the different scenes they have done throughout the album itself. You've got the cover right here, which is I believe VAXIS is like the main character of this trilogy of albums. And then when you actually get into it, I was able to save the hype sticker and put it on my external sleeve. When you actually get into the record itself, it's this really cool triple gatefold vinyl. Now, this is the correct orientation for the album artwork, but it then opens up kind of down like this. So you've got this inside art here. You've got then this bigger open gatefold. So you try and show you all of that on the inside. And then just the outside as well is just like, again, this one continual piece of artwork, which is, sorry, I'm trying to get like the best angle here. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool. It's really well done. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, all the artwork itself ties into the actual storyline. So again, if you're like familiar with the story, it's a sci-fi futuristic story called the Amori Wars, or this is set like after the initial like Amori Wars of like their first few albums. But I love just like how they incorporate that concept into everything. Like the artwork is fantastic. I've read some of the comics. I'm like fairly caught up on the storylines, and it's all done so well. You've got the art sleeves too, lyrics printed on one side, and then on the other side you've got the same. So more lyrics and then more artwork kind of feeding into the storyline of what's happening in the COHEED and CAMBRIA verse. So yeah, absolutely love this. The few records that I've gotten from them, like on the release, so like not reissues, have always been absolutely incredible as far as the packaging goes, the artwork goes. I think they just knock it out of the park every single time. And then as far as the actual records themselves go, so I got the let's see, what are they calling it? The magenta brain vinyl, and it definitely looks like a brain. I think the artwork here is super, super cool. Let's see, I've already put it in a better internal sleeve, and yeah, look at that. I mean, that's just, you can kind of pull this out and hold up through the light here too. Yeah, really cool, kind of this like magenta pink sort of like swirl. You've got like these kind of globs throughout they kind of give it, yeah, like almost like a brain feel. Other records the exact same, so I'm not going to take that one out. But Yeah, really enjoyed this. The sound quality is really good too. It is crisp, it's clean, there's no visible pops. It plays at a reasonable volume on my record player. So yeah, super happy with the physical release. It definitely bumps up the score, at least like the normal score that I would have given this album. So yeah, if you guys like COHEED and Cambria, you like this album, definitely go pick up a copy if you still can. Also, there is a surprise at the end of the vinyl release, and we'll get into that when we get into the actual track listing. So with that being said, let's talk about the music itself. So this, like the other two albums in this VAXIS series, is kind of seeing COHEED like take a step back from some of like the proggier stuff that they're really known for. Now they definitely still have some of those vibes throughout this album, but I'd say like the bulk of it is going to be more just like kind of straight up like emo, post-hardcore, alt rock. And it's got some super nostalgic vibes like all the way throughout. Like you can tell they're pulling from a lot of genres from like the early to mid 2000s for this album, and I'm here for it for sure. So it opens up with Yesterday's Loss. And this, it starts off with a very kind of faint, almost like orchestral intro, very much just like piano driven right in the beginning with like some very light strings. And then it gets into more of like an acoustic sort of coffee shop singer-songwriter song that's really just kind of setting the stage for the story and the album that's about to come. It gives me soft, like Sufjan Stevens vibes a little bit, at least like in a couple parts, but it's fun. It's a beautiful song. I think it's a nice kind of like easy intro into the album. And the vocal harmonies here, I think, are done really well. From there, we get into Goodbye Sunshine. Which is it's a good song. It's catchy, it's upbeat. You kind of get that like arena rock, sort of stadium rock and roll, alt rock kind of right off the bat. It's catchy. It's got some classic COHEED vibes too, while still kind of leaning into that sort of like arena pop rock aesthetic, which they're going to do a couple times on this album. It's good. The guitars are fairly straightforward. The drums, like the most of the instrumentation is nothing's too like crazy or like super intricate, but it's solid, it's well done, and it's a catchy song. From there, we get into Search for Tomorrow. And this one has got some more sort of like classic post-hardcore vibes right off the bat. A little bit of emo as well, but the guitar is a little bit more intricate here. There's this fun sort of like catchy synth lead that comes in occasionally. Drums are a little bit more developed here as well. You're starting to get some more of like the intricacies that you normally hear on a COHEED album. The lyrics, the chorus, again, super catchy. Nothing groundbreaking, but a solid track all around. The guitar tones do have like some octave doubling at a couple points and kind of build up. And then there's a bridge here that does have like some wild and sort of like chaotic guitar tones going throughout it. But yeah, overall, it's a fun song. After that is the title track of Father of Make Believe. This one's got some light, almost like hardcore kind of like chugging throughout it, mixed with some more like atmospheric guitar sweeping. The drums kind of alternate between like steady, just like tempo keeping, and a little bit more like brooding and introspective. Claudio's vocals just absolutely shine here. I mean, he's always kind of been known for his very unique vocal style, very well done, very like falsetto-y, but it just works super well in this song. The bridge kind of brings the vibe and tempo like down low a little bit and really kind of lets you feel like the emotion of the song. And it's a great song. I really like this. It's weird. I feel like recently on albums I haven't been loving the title tracks of like most of the stuff I've listened to, and I'm glad that this is one that I actually do really enjoy. And then from there we get into Mary of Mercy. Now Mary of Mercy is a slower kind of like ballad song. It's like kind of a love song. It's also like there's some like melancholy to it. It gives me soft like MCR vibes at certain points. Definitely has a lot of that again like nostalgic like 2000s to mid 2000s feel. Like this one a lot, very like piano driven, but it has some more epic arrangements as far as the guitar work goes a little bit further into the song. The drums do like when they do finally hit, they just kick in like perfectly, and yeah, it's a fun little ease into the next two songs, which are just about some of the, I think, the craziest things that COHEED and Cambria has ever done, and that is Blindside Sunny and Play the Poet. So I'm going to talk about these songs together because at least on the vinyl, and I think when I was listening on Spotify as well, there's no like break in between them, so they just go from one to the other, and it makes sense because they really do feel like two parts of the same song. They are the heaviest I've heard Coheed go in a while. And it's a weird mix. Like the instrumentation and the guitar, at least in the beginning on Blindside Sunny, is very like hair metal, like heavy metal. But then the vocals come in with this like borderline screaming, filtered, almost like nu metal, hardcore sort of thing. And it's weird. I don't know if I absolutely love it. It's interesting. It's a unique take on like harsh vocals. I think by the fourth time that I've listened to it, I started to enjoy it a little bit more, but it's definitely a little out of left field. The guitar work does get a little bit more into like a straight up like prog metal, post hardcore type of feel, as opposed to the straight just like hair metal, heavy metal in the beginning. The drums are fantastic on both of these songs. I mean, he's really showing his chops here. I can never remember the name of the drummer in Coheed, or at least like their current one. I think they've only had one drummer. I'm not 100% sure on that. Don't fact check me. But these two songs, he really shines. There's some really incredible like fills and intricate work that he does throughout, just like keeping like the steady tempo going forward. The rhythm section has always been really good anytime Coheed has gone a little bit heavier. I think it's the transition between the two. They do this weird little like almost breakbeat sort of like breakdown that gives again more of the kind of like metalcore industrial vibes before getting into like the bulk of Play the Poet, which at some points is like straight up like hardcore metalcore, but then it like gets back into the more like heavy metal aspect to it. And yeah, they're a wild couple of tracks. Again, I definitely enjoyed them, and I don't think that they're bad. It's just not what I was expecting, especially like up until this point on the album. And while I do think it fits in the album, it was just something that kind of threw me off a little bit. But then after those songs, we get into One Last Miracle, which is it's interesting. So that's kind of back into just sort of like the straight up sort of alt rock vibes that they were getting on like the earlier tracks on the album. I was expecting to come out of the heaviness of Blindside Sunny and Play the Poet into something like either like kind of heavy and then like teeters off into something softer, or just something softer, and to go back into a more just kind of straightforward like alt rock jam was an interesting choice. Not that I minded it. Like I think it was still a good song, but like there's nothing super exciting that jumps out to me about it. The drums do get a little interesting at some points, switching up like the tempo and the rhythm fairly effortlessly, but outside of that, it's not the most like exciting song. But then we get into Corner My Confidence, which is a sweet love song. I think it's a love song, similar to Mary of Mercy. It's got like very sweet, uplifting tones while also at the same time being very like melancholy. I think they do that really well, where you're, you know, obviously in the world of Coheed and Cambria, you know, star-crossed lovers is a big theme, and I don't think this song is specifically about that, but they've always like anytime they've done any sort of sweet like borderline love song, it's always backed with a sense of like dread and melancholy and sorrow as well, and I think it comes through very well on this song. It's a beautiful song, honestly. I think it's done really well. The instrumentation is gorgeous, and Claudia's vocals here are just absolutely fantastic. And then we get into Someone Who Can, and this is just about as straight up of like an 80s arena stadium pop rock song that they've ever done. There's this whole resurgence recently, let's say in the past like 5 years or so, of this style of rock. I mean, you've got Bleachers, you've got Sam Fender, you've got any other number of, you know, musicians trying to do their best Bruce Springsteen impression. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's interesting to see Coheed like lean so heavily into it, and they do it well. I think it's a good song, but it's nothing about it is like super interesting to me. Like it doesn't really grab me and make me want to keep coming back. But it's a nice little sort of just break in the album before we get into the last 4 songs, which are the 4 parts of the same concept. So after Someone Who Can, we get into the Continuum 1. Welcome to Forever, Mr. Nobody. This is, like I said, the first of the last 4 songs. This is more of like back to the kind of the straight up like post-hardcore emo stuff that they've been doing on a few other tracks on the album. A little bit heavier in parts. They do that really well where they mix like heavier and more straightforward, like almost metal, like again, like hard rock metal instrumentation with more like kind of ballad-esque, floaty, airy vocals. I mean, that's always kind of been COHEED's thing, but it really, really shines on this song. The drums here are fantastic. Again, nothing like insane or groundbreaking, but just really, really solid throughout. But then from there, we get into the Continuum 2, The Flood. And this is probably my favorite song on the album. I think it's super well done. It does start off with like a little bit more of that straightforward kind of alt rock feel that they've had up until this point. But then it has this like sort of heavy bridge that leads into some of the best guitar work on the entire album. And it's a pretty long song. It's an epic song. They change up pace and tempo a few different times. The drums on this, again, just absolutely stellar. I think it's some of the best on the entire album. The vocals here are insane. It's such a good song. It takes you through a journey just in and of itself. It even has like some like borderline like monk choir vocals, harmony is coming in towards the end. It's got like this kind of orchestral bit, but then gets into a more sort of like ethereal outro with like that trademark COHEED sweeping guitar work. Just a really, really fun song, and the one that like I found myself really, really enjoying more and more on each listen. I kept picking out different parts of it that were just really, really cool. So yeah, hands down, I think the Continuum Part 2, The Flood, was my favorite song on the album. But then we get into the Continuum 3, Tethered Together. And this one, it kind of brings the vibe back down again. It's got a little bit more of like a moody sort of like ballad feel to it. It's interesting. It's not a bad song. Like it's definitely catchy and the instrumentation here is done well, but it's a little like lackluster after experiencing The Flood previously. It's got a slightly like more intricate bridge as far as like the guitar work goes. But even that, it's not like super crazy. But then we get into the last song on the album, the Continuum 4, So It Goes. And this is certainly an interesting way to end the album. It's got kind of like a bouncy theatrical feel, like the closing number of like a musical, which to be fair, like COHEED has always been very theatrical. I mean, if you're going to do a storyline over the course of, at this point, like I think 8 or 9 albums, maybe more, probably more, I can count. We'll call it 8 or 9. I mean, you've got to have some theatrics, right? I mean, you're telling a story with this music more so than like your average musician, average band. But it's really plucky. It's very like bouncy. It does eventually get into a more sort of like rock or like traditional rock oriented song. But it then like finishes with like this big grand orchestral outro, and it's good. Like it's a nice way to finish the album. It ties it all together. It's just a weird, like, at least the beginning part of it is so weird with like how like theatrical it is for an album that for the most part up until this point has been fairly lacking in some of that. Like it's been a fairly straightforward album, a couple like apart from a couple parts here and there. So to end with this was an interesting choice, but it wasn't bad. I think it was good. And if you are listening on Spotify or streaming or you bought it digitally, this is where the album ends. However, if you bought it on vinyl, there is a final track. It is called the Omni Voice, and it takes up the entirety of side D. Now, I'm not gonna lie. So when I do my reviews, specifically for album reviews, I'll listen to it like once or twice on streaming while I wait for the record to arrive, and then I'll listen to it at least once, usually twice, on vinyl before I do my review because I want to be able to talk about the sound quality and stuff like that. So I didn't actually get to listen to the Omni Voice until like earlier today, and it's to call it a song is maybe a strong word. It is a half-hour long atmospheric instrumental that I'm pretty sure is just Claudio like messing around with like a soundboard and synthesizers. So I did read, I think on Reddit, that like he wrote this to have a side D to the album because when they like were pressing it, the actual album only took up 3 sides. And he viewed this as like what VAXIS experienced when he entered the Continuum. And again, I'm not going to get into the storyline. I'm not going to get into the theme, but it does kind of make sense. If you are into like wall of sound, ambient stuff, anything kind of in that genre, you're probably going to enjoy this. Again, it's 30 minutes of what really adds up to like a suspenseful score for like a movie scene that's just drawn out with no movie behind it. So it's interesting. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into it because it's 30 minutes. Go listen to it if you got the vinyl. If not, like, you're not missing a ton. Like, it's cool. I like the experience of it. But it's definitely like you can enjoy the album without it. So overall, I think this was another really solid output from COHEED and CAMBRIA. I don't think that every single risk they took landed super well. And even in like certain parts, they played it a little bit too safe, in my opinion, which like they could have gone somewhere in the middle and found like a sweet spot. But overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to continue to enjoy listening to it. I'll probably throw it into my COHEED rotation every now and then. It'll probably get at least one listen a year, maybe every other year, just based on like the frequency to what I listen to albums on. And yeah, I think normally if I was just looking at the music, I probably would have given this a B. But I love the physical release. I love the actual record itself so much, the packaging, the artwork, everything. It's going to bump it up to a B plus. So that's going to be it for me, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Once again, please like, subscribe, ring that bell. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this album, if you've listened to it. If you haven't, go check it out. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.